Welcome to the No Filter, No Apologies podcast with Rebecca Sachs and Katie Shapiro.
Okay, today we are talking about the fact that corporate systems were built by men for men at a time when women were not even considered as a part of the workforce. We make up just about 50% of the American workforce, and we're going to talk about periods, pregnancy, and perimenopause. Yes, ladies, we're hitting all the topics that other people consider taboo, but that we live with every single day. So
Mhm.
let's start with periods because I think that that's a huge one.
Absolutely.
And OSHA requires bathrooms for women,
Yeah.
but they don't require feminine supplies in the workplace. And that's wild to me because it's not like we're like, you know what would be great? If we could bleed for like an entire week, just once a month, let's just ruin clothes and
Oh my God.
alcohol
Bloat.
and bleed.
The
And,
bloat.
you should tax us on that shit too.
Yeah, it's so funny. So my gym that I go to, they always have feminine products in the gym, and it's male owned.
Okay, that's
But there's women who work there, and obviously women are clients that go there. So that's amazing. Our school has them, but they still charge 25 cents for them.
wow.
And I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever worked somewhere that has them. Now, the clubhouse where like the country club my parents belong to, all that stuff. That just sounds really bougie, but yeah, but they always have feminine products and stuff in the locker room for women. They have everything that you need, like lotion, hair stuff, whatever you need after you shower, they have for you. So that's really nice. But I have never worked in an environment that provides that.
No.
Now that I think about it, and they totally should.
Neither have I.
Because how many times have you been at work and you're like, oh shit, I got my period, and you have to run to your neighbor and nobody has anything to help you?
Nobody has anything. And then on top of that, there's zero understanding in your workplace. It's treated as an accommodation, as if just being a woman, you have to be accommodated instead of, no, the fact is you built this system around male bodies.
Yeah.
And guess what? 50% of your workforce is a female body now. And so you need to have a structure that supports that. I know a lot of women who have medical conditions around their period and there are no laws in place, no healthcare coverage, no ADA accommodations to support that.
Yeah, I have a friend, she has cysts in her ovaries, and when they pop, it's like she has her period and it's debilitating.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to go to work, I know she can't get out of bed to go to work.
Yeah.
There's just no way that she can physically do it. And you have to use your sick time.
Mm-hmm. And then if you call out, you get the repercussions of that.
Yeah.
So you're calling out in a job where you don't have PTO, you're now losing money for something that is completely out of your control. And if you do have PTO, you're deducting out of your sick time, things like that, for something that, again, you have no control over. I know for me, I've been anemic for a large part of my life.
Yep.
So when this would happen to me, I would faint a lot. And it didn't matter what I did during that time of the month. Going to work was a challenge. It would make me nervous to drive because I'm like, am I just going to pass out?
Oh my gosh.
When I was younger. And these are the things that women power through every single day. I'm just going to put something in here. It really pisses me off when people are like, we can't have a woman running the country or running the business because what if they're on their period and they're like emotional? And I'm like, do you know how many women are on their period right now running laps around you, my guy? Like, get it together.
Well, and the funny thing is that men always say that women are so emotional on their periods, but I've seen very emotional men in my career. And
really, the Super Bowl just passed. I've seen a ton of emotional men.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense. And I know you and I have discussed this previously. When I moved to Florida, I had a lot of employees that I was managing that would call in with their period. And coming from the Northeast, working in the capacity that I did, I would always just push through it and do what I had to do to come to work. And I was like, I don't understand how I get my period. They can't come to work. I come to work. I have no choice. Mm-hmm. Store won't open if I don't come to work. And so I became very judgmental with that. But then as you and I were talking about this previously, pushing through, is it the right thing to do? Or are we supposed to be given that time to not have to push through and not have to deal with it and be in pain and be on the job?
Well, we're taught to conform
right
to this system, right? And we're weak if we don't.
Right.
And and we don't want to be a burden to anyone. And so having your period becomes a burden. Actually, no, taking care of your health is critical. You cannot sacrifice your health for some company. And these are health issues. I've met so many women who were suffering with undiagnosed endometriosis because the medical field hasn't caught up, or extreme symptoms. And people are so quick to put young girls and women on birth control to handle period symptoms that are actually cysts in your ovaries or endometriosis or a number of other medical conditions that you can have, and you're just expected to power through it. And I think we were conditioned
Yeah,
to think
absolutely.
that, and that's why we did that. And then thank goodness, I met so many women who had very serious medical conditions associated with their periods.
Yeah.
When people would call out to me with that, I was much more empathetic than, because I understood. I witnessed people that I care about just completely incapacitated, can't move, and things like that. So
I mean, it's the same kind of line, we were always taught not to really call in sick to work too, right? So you just come to work sick, and then, okay, if you get sent home, you get sent home.
Right.
But when you're the one running the ship, you're not going to send yourself home because it needs to be done, right? And I've been sent home when I was the one running the ship before because I was turning green in the store, and they were like, "You need to go."
Yeah.
I was like, "Wait, I'm sick." What?
Yeah. But having to go to your boss and say, "Hey, can I work from home today because I'm bleeding through my clothes every hour, and it's impossible for me to get up from my desk and keep changing my tampon or changing my pad or doing what I need to do." There's such a stigma around it now, and so I think that companies really need to catch up. And if you're a leader in a company, what you and I were talking about, just the empathy when somebody calls out, recognizing your own preconditioning, to looking at women and being like, "Hey, you shouldn't be calling out for this. You should power through," and allowing some for that. But then also, I think if you're in a position to create policy at your company, because there are no laws that support anything for menstruating. So I think if you're in a position in an organization where you can create policies like having free feminine products and put that into your budget and allowing for work from home or flexible scheduling when something like that happens, you'll have a much more successful workforce.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what happens after your period when you stop getting periods because you are pregnant. Something I learned is that working until you deliver your baby is not dedication. It's not healthy. And I can share what happened with me with my first child and then my second. With my first child, I was working in travel and tourism. I worked until 2 days before he was delivered. I wore Reebok Classic sneakers because I couldn't wear any other shoe. Don't touch me. And I couldn't tie them. My laces were pulled completely loose because my feet were so swollen.
Oh.
And I thought that was just because the elevator was broken. I was working in a historical
And you
building.
had to walk up a lot of stairs?
I had to walk up 4 flights of stairs.
Oh, boy.
Up and down multiple times because I was in a customer-facing position. And so I was like, oh, I'm on my feet for 12 hours a day. No big deal. Well, I called and I said, I'm not going to come back. I'm not feeling good. I'm really close to my due date. I was a week away from my due date. And my boss called and said, if you don't have the baby by next weekend, can you come work this event? He was a man. And I was like, I don't think so.
It doesn't work that way, sir.
Yeah. And then look what happened. So I worked Tuesday through Saturday at the time. I had a non-stress test on Monday. I went in, my blood pressure was like over 200.
Oh, wow.
All the alarms were going off. They induced me and I had an eclamptic seizure. And so I almost died. My son almost died. I had short-term memory loss. I wasn't allowed to go up and down stairs for like a month after I had him. I wasn't allowed to hold him for the first 2 weeks standing.
Yeah.
They were afraid, I would have another seizure. I was on all these anti-seizure meds. And I remember only having 12 weeks off for that and going back. And that was partially paid, partially unpaid.
Yeah.
You're talking about 12 weeks of that kind of trauma to your body. I had literal brain damage.
Right.
And then just at my 13th week being like, well, I'm back at work and my baby is with the babysitter and, here I am.
So they didn't know that did they know you were pre-eclamptic prior to delivering?
No. And in fact, so I had seen a doctor that was not my doctor. My doctor was out. and I had just come from dinner with my family, and I had gained like 4 pounds that week. And I said to him, "Oh, well, I just came from dinner." And he said, "Well, what did you eat? The whole cow?" When I tell you,
Did you punch him?
I lost my shit. And I felt in that I made the biggest scene in that office and said, put in big black marker that doctor is to never see me again.
Yeah.
All of that. And then it was a week later.
Was it
when
like water weight? Is that what it ended up?
Yeah. So when you're preeclamptic, you swell and you retain
Yeah.
water and everything. And when I went back in for my non-stress test, it was also not my doctor. It was just the doctor that happened to be there who caught it and was like, "You're preeclamptic and we're getting you in now."
Wow.
Yeah. So that was my first, and that was my first baby. I was a single mom. I had no idea. I just thought all of this.
Did they, because I know it's something they do now, did they do any kind of gestational diabetes test or anything?
I did do the, yeah, and I didn't have that. But,
Okay.
but looking at that in my job, when I went back, I was still nursing. So I was pumping.
Oh, wow.
And I would have to go in my office,
Oy.
close the curtains, and people would be knocking. And I would have to tell people, like, I'm pumping. There were no mother rooms. There was nothing like that. And it was very much like oh, Katie's off the floor again. And I'm like, well, you know, I could feed the masses here in the middle.
I could just leak everywhere if you want me to.
I just need like 20 minutes to run up and pump real quick. So, you know, it was a different time. We're talking over 20 years ago, but that was my experience. I almost died, and I was just expected to get right back up and go to work, and then pumping and working and all the things. So I think that companies don't create environments where pregnancy is supported, and it's just a very natural part of life. And even things that are just recent now, like certain accommodations, like flexible working schedules, sitting, if you're pregnant, being able to sit, if you're in the kind of job where you need to stand, that's all so new.
Yeah.
And there's still not enough protections for pregnant women in the workplace at all.
Yeah. Even it was 20 years ago, God, right? When I first started working in the retail space, right? And so one of our managers was pregnant, and her accommodation was to be able to step outside of the kiosk and go sit down on the bench, and she could get 15-minute increments where she could go sit down. Obviously, if there was a customer, she'd have to come back. Mm-hmm. But that was an accommodation that was made. And I think that was something that was fought for by our district manager at the time, because she had 3 kids. She had been through it. She knew, and all while working within the retail space, right? And I feel like that's more taxing than anything too, because you are on your feet all day. And what are you supposed to do, especially if you're the only one in the store at the time?
Right.
But I know things have gotten better. I've seen companies make the adjustments, create the mother rooms. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that there's actual policies that have been implemented to allow the time.
There's not. And we are one of the only countries that doesn't have a federal maternity leave program.
Yes.
It's insane to me.
It's wild. Our next door neighbors get a year off once they have a baby.
Yeah,
to be able to spend time with that child and start raising that child the way it should be raised, mm-hmm. not just thrown in daycare, which is the other thing too, because when you have children, nobody pays for daycare besides yourself.
No, there's no accommodation for that. And for sick kids and things like that. And I think, don't get me started, I'm going to go on a tangent about how I feel like in our country, they look at women as incubators, whereas in other countries, you recognize the trauma that a woman's body goes through when you're bringing a human life into the world.
Yeah.
And you give the necessary time to heal, recuperate, bond, take care of that baby, because that ultimately makes society better.
Right.
But I think our country treats women as, this is an inconvenience that you're pregnant.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
We want to force you to have babies. We also don't want to accommodate you in any single way through that, or recognize this as a human condition that you have to go through. I have a question for you though, because as a woman without children, I remember hearing other women would complain like, oh, well, just because I chose not to have kids, how come I can't sit during this? And I'm not saying that wasn't a fair question, right? You should have equality across the board. People should have accommodations, but how do you feel as a woman who hasn't experienced pregnancy in the workplace, but has been around and managed other women who have been pregnant? How do you feel about policies like that?
Well, I think there should be policies for that. I do think that it's a different type of life event that they go through, that you've gone through, that you should have accommodations for those. I think that the people that are dealing with it, like any type of medical event.
Yeah.
I don't think it, one way or the other, but honestly, I've thought about having children, but it's so expensive.
Yes.
And I don't want to work just to put a child in daycare.
Yes.
It doesn't, and I also don't want to have a child that I'm not going to be able to be around,
Yeah.
right? Because if you think about, and I know myself and how I operate and how I work, I'm going to work 12 hours, see the kid when it's sleeping, and that's it. Like, and that's not the way it should be. Now, if I was independently wealthy, it would be a different story. But to be able just to have one person working to pay for daycare, like that's not fair to the child, to me. It's not fair to anybody.
No.
Because then I think eventually you end up resenting somebody in the equation, whether it's your partner, the child, yourself, whatever the case may be.
And you bring up a great point, not just about the expense of having children in general, but the unexpected expenses too, because you can plan to your best ability and financially plan and do all the right things. And you can have a child who is born with a medical condition. You can have complications post-delivery that require additional medical attention. We all know our healthcare system in this country isn't great. And I know for me, for my son, after all of that, I mean, I was on medical care, continued in different medications. My son had to be on like supplemental medicine, had things going on too that you don't think about, you don't budget for, you don't know. And I think about that with my daughter too.
Right.
I had a ton of complications with her, and postpartum is another thing we don't really talk about.
No.
Right. We talk about accommodations during pregnancy. And then postpartum, like I said, you're expected to just come back to work and be back.
Not talk about all the hormones and craziness that happens with your body trying to get back to where it was before.
Yeah. And I was sharing with you, and this is just, I'm one person in a sea of millions of women. Yeah. But with my second child, I had an emergency C-section, and then they had to reopen my incision. So even through my maternity leave, I had a packed wound that was open.
Yep.
And I still went back at 12 weeks, and I was not okay.
Right.
And I think I was telling you before, I used to have to go sleep in my car every day at 2:00 because I was so tired, and not from having a baby that was awake, but physically.
Your body was trying to heal.
Right. And when I went to the doctors, they were like, you lost too much blood during your C-section. You're so severely iron deficient. And I was like, you would have thought I had narcolepsy. Like I was just right to sleep. And I had to be on supplements for that. And meanwhile, my daughter also had a ton of complications when she was born, and there was no accommodation for that. All of the testing and the appointments, and luckily my husband and I worked different times at that point, so he could take her and I could take her, but not being there when something's going on with a newborn baby that you just spent 9 months in the ER thinking you were going to lose her every chance you had, and there's nothing to account for that. You're supposed to show up to work after that and just be like, oh, I'm normal. My baby's on a wallaby at home, and pricks all around her ankles from all the blood tests that they're doing. And I had an open wound not even 2 weeks ago. And here I am smiling and ready to work. There's just no recognition or understanding of that. And I think because the system was built around male bodies, which are uninterrupted, there's this, okay, well, that's a you problem.
Right.
And no, it's a 50% of us problem, because 50% of us are women in this workforce. And so
and
figure it out.
You think about the postpartum piece too, right? So just trying to get your mind right. Now you have this child that you're taking care of, and you have to take care of yourself too. Mm-hmm. And so your hormones are trying to get back, your body's trying to get back to its regular shape, and your organs are all moving in your body too. Nobody talks about that. But then the mental health component that comes along with it, because the postpartum stuff is real. Yeah. What I was saying about the postpartum piece is that there's cases where women do things to their children because they're not all mentally there and they can't take it. And they're just like, stop crying, you're driving me crazy, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's nobody helping them get over that hurdle or understand what's happening to their bodies to be able to work through those instances.
Yeah.
Not saying that all the cases should be null and whatever, void, but there are situations, and it's not something that you can control yourself. And so why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we having why isn't the support there for women as they're going through that?
Well, now you're combining the disregard for women's health and seeing women as people who should just power through these things because that's what your body does.
Yeah.
And the stigma associated with mental health. So now I think as women, when you have a baby and then you have like postpartum depression, you're sitting here going, but I'm a mom now and I'm supposed to be loving this and I'm supposed to be enjoying it. And I can't admit that I'm dying inside and I want to cry all the time. I don't know what to, I've seen so many women say that, like, breastfeeding was such a nightmare. And I'm like, okay, well, there's 17 brands of formula if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
You don't have to feel inept. Motherhood looks different on everyone.
Yeah.
Postpartum is when you're figuring out how to be the best mom you can be and still be a whole human being, because you are your own person in addition to being a mom now.
Right.
And you can seek out those resources and you don't have to be ashamed of the fact that your hormones are going wild and it's creating that postpartum depression or other postpartum conditions, and you can reach out and get help.
Yeah. And I know a lot of organizations now have employee assistance programs and things, but I mean, they don't really list postpartum as something to reach out, right?
Yeah.
You see like anxiety, depression, your hot topics of mental health, if you will. You don't see the other pieces that can lead to those things.
I think it's getting better now, but it's not enough. It's certainly not enough. No. And women now are less willing to be quiet about it. So you're starting to see the table turn, but it's not going fast enough. And this is why I always preach, like, we're preconditioned to conform to these systems that weren't built with us in mind. And it's killing us.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's killing us. And it's like, we don't need to do that. Speak up, take care of your health. If you have to move jobs, you can do it smartly, but don't sacrifice your health, your baby's health for a job who hasn't quite caught up yet. And if you're in the kind of position where you can influence change and policy, then start doing that, because you create that healthier workforce.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, there's also a lot of pressure on the backside to be the perfect mom and do things right by other people's standards. And I remember, I'll share this one. I nursed my first child for a full year. It was great. I pumped, I did all the things.
Yeah.
My second child we had so many health issues. I had complications.
Yeah.
He had complications. And at one point the doctor said to me, just do me a favor. We're going to do an experiment. Don't nurse, go get formula, see what happens. Her bilirubin was too high. This was weeks and weeks of this. We did that. Her numbers dropped.
Oh, wow.
Overnight. It was the first time in 3 weeks that anything had changed for her. And I had an organization, I won't name them, calling my phone so many times. I actually lost my shit. I was like, stop calling me. Stop calling me. And they're like, well, I said, medically, she's doing better not being on breast milk. And they were like, but you can mix the breast milk with formula and it's better.
Don't tell me,
baby.
don't tell me how to take care of my child.
I said,
don't tell me how to
call my house again. I will find you and I will drown you in my breast milk. And so, like, this poor woman, I did. And my husband was like, all right, like, hung up the phone. I'm like, stop calling my house because I'm going to lose it. I have a baby. I'm praying to God that this baby survives. This has been 9 months of a high risk pregnancy. We're finally seeing progress and you're calling me about breast milk. And that is, again, just the tiniest thing that women go through, and these pressures that you experience, and there are no resources and you have to provide for your family. You have to go back to work, and work is like, okay, you're back to normal. Welcome back.
Not to be totally controversial or anything, but also think about the situation with you, right? And if you were to get, not that you're going to, but if you were to get pregnant today, right?
Listen, let's not. I'm older now.
It's not going to happen, right? But I'm just saying, like, your body would not be able to accommodate another birth, right? Growing another child.
Mm-hmm.
It could literally kill you. And so being able to have the medical support and opportunity to terminate that because it means your health is something that everybody should have access to.
Yes.
It's not something that we should be like, nope, go die.
Yeah.
Have that baby or die.
Yeah.
Like that's unacceptable.
And also, you bring up such a great point, because we're talking about someone like me who was high risk, who was told you cannot have any more children. It's too big of a risk to your life, and you may not be able to carry that pregnancy to term.
Right.
But we talk about all the couples and the women going through infertility issues.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't want to speak too much on it because I don't know what it's like to go through IVF and all of that.
Yeah.
I've talked to a few people, but I can't imagine what it's like to go through that. The mental health there
Yeah.
of wanting to start a family and not being able to, the
Mhm.
pressure on women that becoming a mother is somehow your primary function in this
Yeah.
world, and the feeling of, well, why can't my body do that?
Right.
And then two, you start doing all of these injections and you're going through that process. And that is a lot too. It's a lot on you. It's a lot on you as a couple. It's a lot on you for your life where you're trying to plan your career and your family planning. And now you're in this different circumstance. And I think there's no real support out there for
There
that
isn't.
either.
And I have friends that have, I had a friend that I want to say 7 times they tried. And finally she was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I can't physically, mentally, I just can't. I'm beat. As much as she wanted children. And I don't think adoption was something that they wanted to do.
Right.
And that's fine. I know other people who did adoption. And even adoption's grueling.
Yeah.
And rigorous and expensive and taxing. And sometimes it doesn't come to fruition and sometimes it does.
Yeah.
But then you have all these people out here that are having kids that shouldn't be having kids either, right? And so, it becomes insanity. And so I feel like a lot of people are raised that being a woman, your worth is to have children. It shouldn't be that way.
No.
It shouldn't be that way at all. And there are companies now that are putting IVF support as a benefit
Yes.
in their packages, which is an amazing thing. There are some that do adoption support too,
Mhm.
which is awesome because those things are so financially taxing. And
Yes.
I can't even imagine, like I have friends that have had other members of their family pay for IVF and things of that because it's so expensive.
Mhm. Well, but you have to think about the lack of value put on reproductive health.
Yeah.
So now you say, well, there's a lack of research, there's a lack of medical support, there's a lack of medical knowledge. And now you have things like IVF, which are amazing for people trying
Yeah.
to start a family, but it almost bankrupts them.
Yeah.
And
And it's not guaranteed.
right. And how is that appropriate too?
Yeah.
If there were better care for women in general with our reproductive health from a young age up. I mentioned earlier, we were talking about periods that they just prescribe birth control to anybody. And
That's what happened to me.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I'm not a doctor. So this is not medical advice by any means.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's a lack of study and science of women's reproductive
Absolutely.
health to give better solutions, more options, and set you up in a way where you can be more proactive with your own reproductive
Absolutely.
health.
And I was on birth control, I want to say for 20 plus years and never had to deal with really any bad menstrual cramps or anything that. And then once I stopped taking birth control, I was like, okay, no, why? Like, this is the pain that I should have had my entire life, but I never really dealt with it because my last birth control was on. I never got my period.
Wow.
And I don't think that was good
That
for
must have
me
been
either.
wonderful.
It was wonderful, but I don't think that was good for my body either. Right?
No, and you made me think of something earlier when you were talking that we didn't touch on, and that is the loss of a baby.
Yes.
Miscarriage.
Oh my God. And that's something that people don't give you the time you need for that too, because it's a significant loss.
Yes.
And I've had people in my family. SMA is prevalent. It's a prevalent gene that they carry. My cousin's first daughter had it and ended up passing at the age of 4.
Oh my God.
And then they had another daughter and they tried to have other babies, but either the child wouldn't last through the pregnancy or the child was going to have the same thing. And so they would have to terminate. And it was devastating for them. And then they just finally decided, okay, we're not going to do this.
Yeah.
We have our daughter, we're going to invest everything into her.
Mhm.
And it's a fact of the world that a lot of people miscarry.
Yes. And I don't think there's support through high risk pregnancies where that is a fear. I can share that my experience with my second child. I found out I was pregnant at 7 weeks, and up until she was delivered, it was touch and go every single week.
Right.
And I thank God every day that she survived. And after that, even when they told me I couldn't have any more children,
Yeah.
it was too risky for me. I was almost grateful to hear that because I was like, I can't go through that again.
Yeah.
And my baby survived.
Yeah.
And yes, we had complications, but so to think of other women who have suffered quietly through miscarriages and then show up to work after a loss like that
I don't even know how you do it.
with no support in an organization, no medical policy to help you
Yeah.
through that, and there's no leave for that. I was just looking up, there are now several federal and state laws along with emerging workplace policies that provide support for employees in the US experiencing a miscarriage. And now they include up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave under the FMLA and protections
that's
against
good.
discrimination. So
That's nice to know. And so, like, you think about it, if you have a living spouse or child that passes, you get bereavement. You usually get time, depending on your organization. They'll give you time off, right,
right.
to grieve. But when you have a miscarriage, they don't think of it that way.
Right. Which is ironic because there's all this discussion about the right to choose right now. But if you miscarry in workplace policy and FMLA and things like that, it hasn't been considered a major loss or the loss of life. And that's horrific. And so I do want to extend our love out to those who have experienced loss like that and had to, or were expected to power through it and just show up at work every day.
Yeah.
I think this is why we're talking about this, right? This is why periods, pregnancy, perimenopause, because they're all treated as taboo subjects.
Yeah.
And these are real things that 50% of the workforce is experiencing every day. And when you show up to work, you don't know if the woman sitting next to you just experienced the miscarriage.
Right.
You don't know if she has endometriosis and is in the worst pain of her life during her period right now. You don't know if you might see that she's pregnant and you have no idea that she's terrified of losing that baby today because something is going on medically or losing her job. And these are every single day, 50% of the population is battling some, if not all, of those challenges. And there's nothing in the workplace to say, yeah, this is normal. And we have policies and things in place like a mother's room that we talked about, or feminine products in the bathroom. And so that leads us, I think, to the last piece of our topic here, which is perimenopause, which is something that women never really talk about, right?
It's very new.
I think you looked at it as like a midlife crisis for women.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think we've heard about menopause since we were younger, since we talked about menstrual cycles in general, right?
Right.
You have the beginning is menstruation and then the end's menopause, right?
Yes.
And then with the perimenopause now, because it also impacts women of our age, it's all over social media. Everybody's talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And since I was in my 20s, I've always had night sweats. I have no idea why, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of those wonderful things that I've gotten from my father because he sweats gross and so do I. But now that I'm in my 40s, it's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And especially around depending on where I am in my cycle for the month. And it is so uncomfortable. And then even getting ready today, I'm like hot and sweaty and I can't get things done in the time that I'm supposed to just because who knows what's happening with all the hormones.
Right.
It's absolutely absurd. And then, everybody has good days and bad days, but I also feel that it is more of an emotional roller coaster at this point in my life of 46 years old than it has been in the last 10 years because of all the changes that are about to come.
It's funny that you bring that up because you also this is the time where most women are achieving peak leadership in their careers.
Yep.
And then their body starts to fight against them. And it's another thing we're just expected to power through.
Yeah.
Well, how do you power through when you're full on sweating?
Yes.
Out of nowhere.
That flashes in the middle of the day.
I will tell you, for me, so this is something I learned, and I think it's the lack of education around female bodies and hormones and the taboo around hormone therapy and things like that. But for me, I have had nothing but glucose and insulin related issues. And it took to sit with not a primary care physician. I had to go to not even a specialist. I had to go to a separate organization who would just listen to me, run all the blood work and say, yeah, it's an entire cycle of this hormone affects this hormone, which affects your insulin, which affects your glucose. And yes, you have to exercise and you need to do strength training as a woman. But also, if you can't get out of bed and you don't feel well enough to how do you do that? And then you're gaining weight. And then it's all of the societal pressures to look beautiful and be a certain size. And you're processing all of that at your peak leadership and careers. And again, you're powering through this every
Yeah.
single day without recognition or support.
Yeah.
It's wild to me.
It is. It's basically insanity. And now that we're talking about it and we know more about it, like I said, on social media, I think the things that I see and I laugh at the most are some of the perimenopause stuff.
Mhm.
I have friends that send me stuff all the time. My sister-in-law is always sending me stuff
Yeah.
because we're all experiencing it. And just like anything else, awareness and talking about it is the first step. And the more that we continue to talk about it and acknowledge the weird shit that happens to us, I think the better off that we're all going to be in the long run. And then start impacting those changes in the work environment.
Yeah, but I want to point something out because I was thinking about this
Yeah.
and I neglected to say earlier. I don't know about you, but back in the day when you couldn't scroll through commercials, you had
Yeah.
to actually watch. I was seeing Viagra commercials when I was
Oh, left
like
and right,
a teenager, like a young teen. That was up there. Erectile dysfunction.
all over the place.
I learned so much about erectile dysfunction, which I would never experience in my entire life, but I knew about it when I was 16. But you know what I didn't know? I didn't know that when you hit your 40s, your hormones were going to be like, hey, F you.
Yeah.
We're going to totally F up your day and you're never going to know why and where it's coming from. We're going to make you randomly sweat. We're going to make you randomly freeze. We're going to make you so tired you can't function.
Randomly burst out in tears for no reason.
Right. And it is the wildest thing, but nobody was ever teaching us about that. And then now when you bring it up, everybody's like, oh, something us girls go through. Let's keep it quiet. No, I'm not going to keep it quiet. Do you know why I'm not going to keep it quiet? Because that's how we've been forced to suffer and conform.
Yeah.
This system is built by men for men. And it's very frustrating. And no, we need to talk about it. Women need to know that you're not alone. Rebecca's sweating and I can't figure out how to eat and exercise in the appropriate schedule every day to keep me from collapsing and just being so tired that I can't function. So yeah, we're going through this every day together. I'm going to hand her tissue. She's going to hand me a snack and we're going to keep each other going through this podcast. But I think as women, we need to come together and talk about it. And as men who love and support us, or men in leadership, you also need to recognize that 50% of your workforce is going through this. And there's nothing shameful. There's nothing accommodating about it. This is a real life thing. It's okay to talk about. It's okay to have policies in place to support the women in your job. It's going to make your workforce perform at a higher level. If I don't have to leave and buy tampons, or Rebecca doesn't have to go get her own little air conditioning thing to blow on her at her cube or whatever it might be. These are real things that we need to not be ashamed to talk about. And I think the mental health that goes along with perimenopause too. Yeah. Because when your hormones are fluctuating like that, it's like any other time when you have your period, when you're pregnant, now in perimenopause, those hormones are changing. And you start thinking like, am I crazy right now? Like, why am I crying over this puppy video?
Or I hear a song. It happens to me all the time. I hear a song that reminds me of my mother and I start crying. I'm like, what the hell? Why is this happening? Make it stop.
Yes. Add to that all of the other things that are happening at this age. Like sometimes you have kids of all ages. Sometimes you have aging parents that you're dealing with. And then you're also trying to figure out your own health. And as women, we put everyone else first. Right. And so it's another thing that we just go, I'm going to power through this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to power through this. I don't have time. I know it's just the hormones and I can push this. No big deal. It is a big deal. And I will tell you something a health coach said to me. She said, I was like, I can just power through that. I'm not worried about that. And she was like, but you don't have to. And I was like, no, I know, but I can. And she was like, but you don't have to. You don't have to live that way. Yeah. You don't have to live that way. And if you're not comfortable with hormone therapy, you can take these natural supplements. You can do this. We can come up with another plan, but let's talk about it. Yeah. And she made me stop and talk about it and be like, oh, okay. And I'm not going to lie. The one way she got me to do that was through my insulin and glucose because I didn't associate that with the hormones, perimenopause or hormones. Yeah. And she was like, by the way, this is impacted by your hormones too. And I was like,
well, and it's funny because when you mentioned the ED commercials, I hear on the radio every day, they have advertisements for hormone replacement therapy for men, testosterone for men. Now, the weight loss organization that I had gone through worked with last year, they also do hormone replacement therapy. They don't make it gender specific where there's other advertisements out there that are more gender specific, focusing on men's health, but you don't hear anything usually about women's health. Yeah. But the weight loss company, they do I feel like they cater more to women. Not that they're not gender specific, but in general, I feel like that's kind of how they are. But they do hormone replacement for women too.
Yeah. And I think it's something else when we're talking about commercials is hair loss. I talked to several women who are losing their hair. Their hair is thinning during perimenopause. And you see so many support systems and, treatments for men, and then nothing really for women out there. I see a couple now starting to come out, but it's just now that women are feeling like, okay, I can be vocal about this. And then the other thing that's happening at each segment of this, right? If you're a woman who is having periods and you go into work and you're just pushing through that, but if you have a medical condition, it affects your ability to start your career off on the right foot or grow your career at that path. Then when you're pregnant, there's pressure on women to just leave the workforce for a variety of reasons. One, you want to bond with your child. You might have medical conditions. You might not be able to afford daycare, but you're leaving your career for this. And then in perimenopause, women decide to leave as well because it becomes too difficult to navigate and they're right at that peak. And so for making up 50% of the workforce, and then at each stage of this, because it is uncared for, unacknowledged, undiscussed, you actually lose really capable women who could have a big impact on organizations if only there was more support in the correct way. That these are normal things that half of our workforce goes through, and we need to have policies in place, and then obviously the healthcare and government policy and things like that. But as an organization, you can do things to take care of 50% of your workforce. It is not an accommodation. This is real life shit that everybody's going through. And you just need to put on your big girl, big boy pants and acknowledge that, hey, this is a mature thing that we need to discuss if we really care about our employees.
Yeah.
And I think, what advice would you give women at each stage of that, going through their careers and being a woman who, is navigating period symptoms or pregnancy or perimenopause?
I think in today's world, you have to just be open and honest and candid about it, right? And this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. And here's the thing. If they're not receptive to it, that's not the place for you.
Right.
And it's time to exit, whether it's a male or female leader that you're dealing with too. And if it makes them uncomfortable, tough shit.
Yeah.
This is the reality of the world and you need to listen to me. And if you don't want to, okay, I'm out. I know it's easier said than done, but it lets you know where they stand as a person, as an organization, because if they're your leader, they're representing the company that you're working with.
That's true. And I think when you look at companies, there's so few female leaders that it makes it difficult as a woman in the workplace to speak to another woman who understands.
Yeah.
I have worked with male leaders, and I was thinking about it in preparation for this episode. All of the male leaders who have been empathetic to women or have been more understanding and not put pressure when you're pregnant and all of those things, they were girl dads.
I was just going to say, were they all girl dads?
They were girl dads.
I was going to say.
And they were some of the most amazing male leaders I've ever had, and the kind of male leaders that you want to work for, that recognize that 50% of the workforce is going through this, and it's not an accommodation.
Yeah.
It's just normal. And so I think if you're a male leader, this conversation should speak to you too. I'm sure there are women in your life or women who work for you where you can think about them differently.
Absolutely.
I remember working at an organization where it was a predominantly male workforce, and the women who came in had to say, the bathroom that you have is not safe for us. Oh. It was a unisex bathroom, and then that male leader took that to heart, and he was like, okay, and got a new bathroom put up right away and everything. Great. So that was great. But it took for a woman to come and say, we're uncomfortable, or for that male leader to have a focus group of women recognizing that they were a minority of the workforce at that point and saying, what are we missing that we don't know? And I think if you're a male leader, you have the ability to do that now and set your company apart and bring in top talent in women, because they're going to want to work for a company that does that. And I think my advice to women is, because this system was not built with us in mind, you cannot conform to the standards of that system.
Right.
You need to be willing to move jobs more frequently than we're taught. You need to be open to that, as Rebecca mentioned, recognizing this isn't the place for me, and then strategically making that move, because you're going to have, whether you're early on in your life and all you're facing right now is periods, or you're pregnant, or you're about to go into perimenopause, These things are going to happen in your life. And each time you need to prioritize your health because nobody else is going to do that for you. And we live in a society, unfortunately, where medical research has not caught up. Corporate policy has definitely not caught up. Laws have not caught up. In fact, they're going backward. So
Absolutely.
you need to advocate for yourself, recognize that what you're going through is what other women are going through, and then make your career choices accordingly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think also, researching prior to taking a role, researching the organization and seeing what other people have said about that organization and what experiences they've had. Find someone who's worked there or is working there and have candid conversations and make sure that you are fully exploring the opportunity before jumping in.
And if it's a public company, you can actually see what is the makeup of the workforce. Because
Yeah.
if you go in there and it's only 5% women, you're walking into an environment that is not prepared for a female workforce.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's empowering for all of you. And we hope that you feel not alone.
Yeah, because you're not.
Yes. And we're wishing you all well through these health journeys, wherever you are in that phase. And just know that you have two women, at least here at No Filter, No Apologies, that support you.
Follow us on all your socials, NFNA Podcast. Until next time.